I stared at Nadine in disbelief, her words like a slap across my face. You want me to leave? This is my home too. Nadine's thin lips curled into a smirk. Was, dear, this was never truly your home. You served your purpose as a stand-in mother to my son, but now it's time for his real family to move in. My stomach churned as she callously dismissed the life I had built with Aaron. Her beady eyes bore into me, daring me to challenge her authority. But Aaron loves me. We're happy here, I protested weakly, knowing deep down that my pleas would fall on deaf ears. Nadine's shrill laughter cut through the tension. Oh, Eliza, you poor, naive girl. Aaron may have married you out of pity, but his loyalty has always been to his real family, his blood. I flinched at her words, the sting of truth laced with malice. Ever since I had been unable to conceive, Nadine had made it clear that I would never truly belong. I'm giving you 2 weeks to pack your things and find somewhere else to live, she declared, her tone brooking no argument. Meredith and Jeff will be moving in, and we can't have an outsider lingering around. Rage bubbled within me, but years of conditioning had taught me to bite my tongue. Nadine thrived on conflict, using it to justify her cruelty. You'll thank me one day, Eliza, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. It's for the best, really. Now you can start over, find a man who can give you the child you so desperately crave. I wanted to scream, to lash out at her for her callousness, but I knew it would only fuel her vindictive fire. So I swallowed my pride and nodded, my heart shattering into a million pieces. As Nadine swept out of the room, her victory assured, I sank onto the couch, the weight of her ultimatum crushing me. This was supposed to be my happily ever after, but in the blink of an eye, it had all been ripped away, leaving me adrift and utterly alone. The facade of our happy family life had been crumbling for years, but I had desperately clung to the hope that Aaron would eventually stand up to his mother. How naive I had been. You knew about this, didn't you? I demanded, confronting him after Nadine's bombshell announcement. Aaron's gaze flickered away from mine, his silence speaking volumes. Eliza, please understand. Understand what? I snapped, anger coursing through my veins. That you were going to let your own mother throw me out on the streets like some unwanted stray? He winced, but still couldn't meet my eyes. It's not like that. Meredith and Jeff need a place to stay, and with you being... He trailed off, the unspoken words hanging between us like a poisonous cloud. Unable to give you a child? I finished bitterly. Is that what this is really about, Aaron? Your mother's never accepted me because I couldn't bear your precious heir. His silence was deafening, confirming my worst fears. All those years of enduring Nadine's snide comments and disapproving glares, it had all been leading up to this moment. How could you let her do this to me? I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. After everything we've been through together, I thought our love meant more than some twisted sense of family obligation. Aaron's face crumpled with remorse, but it did little to ease the ache in my heart. I'm sorry, Eliza. I never wanted to hurt you, but my mother, she has a way of making things happen, whether I agree or not. I scoffed bitterly. So you just rolled over and let her dictate our lives? Some husband you turned out to be. His jaw tightened, a flicker of defiance sparking in his eyes. Don't act like the victim here, Eliza. You knew what you were getting into when you married into this family. The harsh words stung, but deep down, I knew he was right. Nadine had made her disdain for me clear from the start, and I had foolishly believed that love would conquer all. Well, I'm done being your mother's doormat, I declared, squaring my shoulders. If she wants me out, then so be it, but I'm not going down without a fight. Aaron's eyes widened, startled by my sudden resolve. Eliza, don't do anything rash. But I had already made up my mind. Nadine thought she could just discard me like yesterday's trash, but she had no idea what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. It was time to remind her that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The days ticked by, each one bringing Meredith and Jeff's arrival closer. Nadine was like a whirlwind, transforming our home into a shrine for her precious daughter and son-in-law. I thought we could repaint this room in a soft blue, she chatted breezily as she flipped through paint swatches. Meredith always loved that color. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to scream. This was my home, the sanctuary Aaron and I had built together, and now it was being stripped away, piece by piece. What do you think, Eliza? Nadine asked, her tone saccharine sweet. I want everything to be perfect for when they move in. The implied message was clear. I was already an outsider in my own home. A bitter taste filled my mouth as I forced a tight smile. Whatever you think is best, Nadine. Her eyes narrowed at my clipped tone, but she chose to ignore it. Of course it is. I always know what's best for my family. The jab hit its mark, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Deep down, a seed of defiance was taking root, growing stronger with each calculated slight. You know, I was thinking we could convert the guest room into a nursery, Nadine continued, oblivious to my inner turmoil. Meredith and Jeff will want to start a family of their own soon. The words were like a knife twisting in my gut. For years, I had longed for a child of my own, only to have that dream crushed time and again. And now, Nadine was dangling the possibility of grandchildren in front of me, a cruel reminder of what I could never have. That's a wonderful idea, I managed to choke out, my throat constricting with unshed tears. Nadine's smile was triumphant, reveling in my pain. I'm sure you understand, Eliza. Blood is thicker than water, after all. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I was done being the meek, submissive wife cowering under Nadine's oppressive thumb. If she wanted a war, then a war she would get. Of course, Nadine, I replied, my voice steely calm. I'll start packing my things so Meredith and Jeff have plenty of room for their new family. Her brow furrowed, sensing the shift in my demeanor, but unable to pinpoint the cause. Well, there's no need to rush. You still have a few days left. I shook my head, a cold smile playing on my lips. Oh, I insist. Wouldn't want to overstay my welcome in your family's home. Nadine opened her mouth, no doubt to deliver another cutting remark, but I had already turned on my heel, leaving her gaping in my wake. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was done playing by her rules. As I packed up my belongings, memories assaulted me from every corner. The vase Aaron had gifted me on our first anniversary, the framed photo from our honeymoon. Remnants of a life I had so foolishly believed would last forever. Nadine's vindictive behavior should have been a glaring red flag from the start, but I had been too blinded by love and the promise of finally belonging to a real family. Her subtle digs about my infertility had started small, like pebbles chipping away at my self-worth. A woman's greatest purpose is to bear children, she would say, her eyes boring into me with thinly veiled disdain. It's a shame you can't experience that joy. Each barb felt like a knife to the heart, but I had swallowed my pain, desperate to prove my worth to this woman who held the key to my happiness. As the years passed, the insults grew more overt, eroding the foundations of my marriage bit by bit. You'll never truly understand what it means to be a mother, Nadine had sneered during one particularly heated argument. You're just playing house, pretending to be part of this family. Aaron had stood by silently, his passivity a betrayal in itself. How could he not see the damage his mother was inflicting, not just on me, but on our relationship? Now, as I sifted through the remnants of our life together, the truth became painfully clear. Nadine had never accepted me, and she had slowly but surely poisoned Aaron against me, exploiting my deepest insecurity for her own twisted gain. A sudden burst of anger propelled me forward, fueling a newfound determination. I was done being the victim, the hapless pawn in Nadine's cruel game. It was time to fight back, to expose her for the manipulative tyrant she truly was. With renewed vigor, I began scouring our home, hunting for any shred of evidence that could unravel the intricate web of lies she had spun. Financial documents, personal journals, anything that could shed light on the depths of her deceit. As I uncovered more and more damning proof, a plan started to take shape in my mind. Nadine thought she could simply discard me, but she had underestimated my resilience. I would make her pay for every tear, every ounce of pain she had inflicted upon me, and this time there would be no escape. The eve of Meredith and Jeff's arrival was upon us, and the tension in the house was palpable. Nadine bustled about like a woman possessed, ensuring every last detail was perfect for her precious darlings. The good china needs to be set out, she barked at me, her eyes narrowing as I lingered in the hallway with my suitcases. And make sure the guest rooms are spotless. I won't have my grandchildren living in squalor. The words stung, but I refused to take the bait. Of course, Nadine, wouldn't want to disappoint the happy family. She opened her mouth, no doubt to deliver another scathing remark, but I cut her off. Don't worry, I'll be out of your way soon enough. Just give me a few more hours to finish packing. Nadine's lips pressed into a thin line, her disdain for me written plain across her face. See that you do. I want this place sparkling when they arrive. With a dismissive wave of her hand, she turned and swept back into the living room, leaving me seething in her wake. The audacity of that woman, acting as though she owned every inch of this house that Aaron and I had built together. A surge of determination washed over me as I lugged my suitcases into the bedroom. Nadine thought she had won, that she had successfully severed the last ties binding me to this family. But she was gravely mistaken. As I surveyed the room, my eyes fell upon the stack of damning evidence I had meticulously compiled. Financial records, personal journals, even audio recordings of Nadine's most vicious tirades. Proof of her manipulation, her greed, and her utter disregard for anyone but her precious bloodkin. A sly smile curved my lips as I began strategically placing the documents around the room, ensuring Aaron would stumble upon them in due time. He may have been blinded by his mother's lies, but the truth had a way of shattering even the thickest illusions. With each folder, each recording I artfully arranged, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. Nadine had underestimated my resolve, thinking I would slink away like a kicked dog. But she was about to learn a valuable lesson. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I took a moment to savor the calm before the storm. Tomorrow, everything would change. Meredith and Jeff's arrival would be the catalyst, the spark that ignited the powder keg I had so carefully laid. And when the smoke cleared, Nadine's world would come crashing down around her, exposing the twisted depths of her betrayal for all to see. I would have my revenge, and she would finally reap the consequences of her actions. A twisted sense of satisfaction unfurled in my chest as I zipped up the last suitcase. Let the games begin. The arrival of Meredith and Jeff was met with fanfare befitting royalty. Nadine fussed over them like a mother hen, clucking and preening as she ushered them into their new home. "Welcome, my darlings," she cooed, enveloping them in a suffocating embrace. "Everything is just perfect for you." I watched the sickening display from the sidelines, bile rising in my throat. Nadine's blatant favoritism, her utter disregard for my presence, it was all part of her twisted game. As Meredith's eyes fell on me, a flicker of unease crossed her features. "Eliza, I didn't realize you'd still be here." Before I could respond, Nadine swooped in, her arm snaking around Meredith's waist. "Don't worry about her, dear. She's just tying up a few loose ends before she moves out." The dismissive tone, the way she spoke as if I weren't even in the room, it was the final straw. White-hot rage bubbled up inside me, and I could no longer contain the torrent of emotions I'd been bottling up for years. "Enough, Nadine," I spat, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "I'm done playing your sick little games." Her eyes widened in mock surprise, but I could see the glint of satisfaction lurking beneath the surface. She lived for these confrontations, thrived on the drama she so expertly orchestrated. "Why, Eliza, whatever do you mean?" she simpered, her tone dripping with false innocence. I barked out a harsh laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "Cut the act, Nadine. We both know you've been plotting this for years, slowly chipping away at my self-worth until I had no choice but to leave." Meredith and Jeff shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between us like spectators at a tennis match. But I paid them no heed. This was between Nadine and me, and it was time to lay all the cards on the table. "You've never accepted me as part of this family," I continued, my voice rising with each accusation, "all because I couldn't give Aaron the precious grandchild you so desperately craved." Nadine's mask of indifference faltered, a flicker of rage contorting her features. "How dare you speak to me that way, you ungrateful little wretch? I gave you a home, a family, and this is how you repay me?" "A home?" I echoed incredulously. "This was never my home, Nadine. It was a gilded cage, and you were the warden, keeping me trapped in a cycle of pain and humiliation." Her eyes narrowed to slits, but I pressed on, emboldened by the taste of revenge on my tongue. "But no more. I'm done being your punching bag, your scapegoat for every twisted insecurity you harbor." With a flourish, I produced the stack of evidence I had so carefully compiled, financial records, audio recordings, all laid bare for the world to see. You thought you could control me, manipulate me into submission, I hissed, reveling in the look of dawning horror on Nadine's face. But you underestimated me, and now the truth is out. It's time to face the consequences of your actions. The aftermath of my explosive revelation was like a bomb going off in the midst of Nadine's perfectly curated world. Shrapnel scattered in all directions, tearing through the delicate facades she had so meticulously constructed. "This is preposterous," she sputtered, her face mottled with rage as she snatched the damning evidence from my hands. "Lies, all of it. Twisted fabrications meant to turn my own family against me." Meredith and Jeff stood frozen, their eyes wide as they took in the incriminating documents. Nadine's iron grip on them had always been absolute, but now the cracks in her armor were glaringly apparent. "Mom, what is all this?" Meredith whispered, her voice trembling with trepidation. "These numbers, these recordings." "Don't listen to her," Nadine snapped, rounding on her daughter with a ferocity that made us all flinch. "She's a scorned woman, lashing out like a petulant child. This is nothing but a pathetic attempt to tear this family apart." For a fleeting moment, I saw the doubt flicker across Meredith's face, the seed of uncertainty taking root. But then Nadine was upon her, wrapping her in a smothering embrace, whispering poisonous reassurances in her ear. "You know I would never betray you, my precious girl," she cooed, shooting me a venomous glare over Meredith's shoulder. "This outsider is simply jealous, unable to accept that she can never be a true part of our family." The words were like a dagger to the heart, but I refused to let her shake my resolve. "Not this time. Is that what you really believe, Aaron?" I challenged, turning to my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband. "That I would go to such lengths out of mere jealousy?" He flinched at the sound of my voice, his eyes darting between the damning evidence and his mother's pleading gaze. For years, he had been caught in the crossfire of our toxic dynamic, paralyzed by his inability to choose a side. But now, confronted with the ugly truth laid bare before him, he had no choice but to face the reality he had been so adept at ignoring. "Aaron, please," Nadine implored, her voice trembling with a desperation I had never witnessed before. "You know I only ever wanted what was best for you, for this family." But as his gaze fell upon the incriminating documents, the countless lies and manipulations she had so carefully orchestrated, something shifted in his expression. The veil of denial was finally lifting, revealing the harsh reality he had been willfully blind to for far too long. "What you wanted," he murmured, his voice laced with a pain so raw it cut me to the core, "was control. Control over me, over all of us." Nadine's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "You took advantage of my love, my loyalty," Aaron continued, each word a bullet tearing through the delusions that had bound him for so long. "And for what? Money? Power? Your twisted sense of family pride?" His eyes met mine then, and in that moment I saw the man I had fallen in love with all those years ago, strong, unwavering, and finally free from the shackles of his mother's oppression. "I'm sorry, Eliza," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything." And though the road ahead was uncertain, though the scars of Nadine's betrayal would never fully heal, I knew in that moment that I had won. Her reign of terror was over, and I was finally, blessedly, free. The weight of Nadine's toxic presence finally lifted, a suffocating shroud torn away to reveal the first glimpses of a life unencumbered by her manipulation. As I packed up the last of my belongings and prepared to leave the house that had been both a sanctuary and a prison, a sense of trepidation mingled with the overwhelming relief coursing through my veins. "Are you sure about this, Eliza?" Aaron's voice cut through the silence, laced with a sadness that tugged at my heart. "There's still time to work things out, to start over." I turned to face him, taking in the slump of his shoulders, the weariness etched into his features. For so long he had been caught in the crossfire of his mother's war against me, paralyzed by his inability to break free from her iron grip. "You know there's no going back from this," I said softly, willing him to understand. "What she did, the way she treated me, it's unforgivable." His eyes clouded with pain, but he gave a solemn nod. "I know, believe me, I know. But you have to understand, she's still my mother." The mother who systematically tore us apart, who made me feel like an outsider in my own home, I countered, my voice rising with each accusation. The one who was willing to cast me aside like garbage the moment her precious daughter needed a place to stay? Aaron flinched, the truth of my words hitting their mark. You're right, he conceded, his voice barely above a whisper. What she did was inexcusable, but that doesn't make it any easier to turn my back on her completely. A pang of sympathy pierced my heart as I watched the turmoil play out across his features. For all her faults, Nadine had still been the woman who raised him, the one constant in his life, however twisted that constant may have been. I'm not asking you to cut her off entirely, I said, my softening. Just give me the space I need to heal, to find myself again without her toxic influence looming over me. He searched my face, as if seeking reassurance that this wasn't goodbye forever. After a beat, he gave a slow nod, resignation settling over his features. I understand, he murmured, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry, for not seeing the truth sooner, for not protecting you the way I should have. I offered him a small, bittersweet smile. We were both caught in her web, Aaron, but now we have a chance to break free and build something better, even if that means going our separate ways for a while. A weight seemed to lift from his shoulders at my words, and in that moment I saw a glimmer of the man I had once loved so fiercely. The man who had been slowly suffocated by Nadine's toxic grip, but who was now fighting his way back to the surface, gasping for air. As I turned to leave, my suitcases in hand, a part of me mourned the life we had once shared, the dreams that had been so cruelly shattered, but a larger part felt a sense of liberation. A newfound strength that could only come from finally shedding the shackles of Nadine's oppression. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with obstacles and painful memories. But for the first time in far too long, I felt a glimmer of hope. A belief that I could forge my own path, unburdened by the weight of someone else's twisted expectations. And as I stepped out into the crisp morning air, the first tendrils of sunlight peeking over the horizon, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, emboldened by the knowledge that I was finally, truly free.
Fatherless lady, you are unnecessary in meetings. What does my family background matter? Have you not heard me? Old lady, are your ears getting bad? Trust is crucial in our field. Is someone from a single-mother household someone you can truly trust? What a ridiculous argument from Steve, the younger worker. Although he had previously made crude comments, he had now descended to the point of disparaging my family's circumstances, which were completely out of my control. How pitiful must Steve's life be for him to feel the need to degrade people in this way, to insult someone this much? Is that correct? I'm going to leave now, though. I felt like I was walking out of the room with confidence, but as soon as I was by myself, I started crying. I never imagined being chastised for coming from a single-mother home at this age. Despite my best efforts, I am confronted with an unalterable reality that threatens to shatter me. I always think of that person in times like this. I have a great ally who has added color to my life, even though my mother and I have lived alone together up until this point. That person's presence is the reason I've been able to overcome so many obstacles. I hurried to my mother's side, believing that. I am a 43-year-old bank employee named Jessica Wilson. Emma, my 70-year-old mother, lives with me. I threw myself into my work without any interruptions, and before I knew it, I had grown to this age. I consider the time I spend interacting with customers at the counter to be the most significant aspect of my work. My mother and I have faced many difficulties in our life together. I owe her everything because she raised me by herself starting when I was 10 years old. I can't even begin to picture the hardships she must have faced. I have no doubt that Mom made innumerable sacrifices that I was unaware of. I could never ignore her because of this. The foundation of my existence is my relationship with my mother. In my early recollections, we appeared to have everything we needed and had a luxurious lifestyle. Our house was so huge that guests frequently got lost inside, and it included a detached wing and a sizable garden. We even had employees to take care of whatever requests we made. I used to think that if I wanted something, I could have it. However, my life took a sharp shift at the age of 10, making it seem as though everything had fallen apart. My parents unexpectedly entered my room as I was playing with my dolls. My mother was on the verge of tears, while my father's brows were pinched in rage. "What's wrong?" "Jessica, listen carefully. Starting today, we have to leave this house." "What do you mean?" "This house is no longer ours. From now on, we'll be living somewhere else." Questions swirled in my head, but my mother silently began packing my belongings into a bag. It seemed the talk of leaving the house was true. "I've packed your clothes. Now, choose which toys you want to bring." "Can't I bring them all?" "That might be tough. Just pick the ones that are most important to you." Having been accustomed to a life of luxury, I couldn't quite imagine what it would mean to move into a small room. Behind my mother, I could see my father moving restlessly, urging us to hurry. I grabbed the doll I was holding and decided to take it with me. It was modeled after a little girl from another country. I slipped the doll's clothes and accessories into the remaining spaces of the bag. "Are you ready? Let's go then." And so, we left the house. I didn't understand what was happening and kept glancing around nervously. As we walked down the long hallway, I could hear the voices of the house staff coming from one of the rooms. Apparently, my father had found a younger woman he wanted to remarry, so my mother was no longer needed. Their tone was one of irresponsible excitement, as though they were enjoying the gossip about our family. My father didn't show any hint of concern. Looking back, he probably didn't want to deal with demands for alimony or any other complications. Being an old-fashioned man, he had likely used his authority as a husband to divorce my mother. My mother, being a strong-willed person, didn't cry or complain. She quietly understood my father's intentions and agreed to the divorce. When we left the house, none of the staff who would normally see us off came out to bid us farewell. There was no car waiting for us, either, so the two of us began walking down the road. The shiny leather shoes I wore, adorned with decorations, quickly became scuffed, and my toes started to ache. I had never walked this much before in my life. Even so, my mother didn't stop. She clenched her teeth, kept her gaze forward, and just kept walking. I couldn't help but realize that something had drastically changed. My mother walked straight to a real estate office and chose an apartment that could be rented immediately. "What's an apartment?" "It's where we're going to live from now on." When we arrived in front of the building, I couldn't understand how this place could be someone's home. To describe it in words I understood back then, it looked like a storage shed. It was old, with an overall dull and faded appearance. The pillars and walls seemed ancient, and I couldn't help but worry if it could really keep out the wind and rain. The inside of the apartment was just as bad, dusty and unwelcoming. At first, I was reluctant to even go inside. "Are we really going to live here?" I liked our old house better. "You'll get used to it soon." "It's only for a little while," my mother replied, her face tense. For someone like her, who had lived as a lady of the house with servants in a spacious mansion, moving into such an old apartment must have been a humiliation. She never voiced her dissatisfaction like I did, but I'm sure she wasn't at peace inside. Up until then, my mother hadn't worked, and we had very little savings. The small amount of property my father had given us barely covered the deposit for the apartment and some basic necessities before it ran out. The concept of not having money was a completely new experience for me. Whenever I heard the phrase, "I don't have money," in conversations or on TV before, I always thought it was some kind of joke. Most of the time, it wasn't serious, it was just a casual remark. But now, it was different. When I asked for snacks or toys like I used to, my mother would look sad and say, "Maybe next time." I quickly learned that next time didn't come very often. I also transferred from my private school to a public one. The atmosphere was completely different, and at first, I was confused. But over time, I began to see the advantages. There were other kids who were just as poor as we were, and I no longer felt pressure to spend money just to fit in. Little by little, I came to understand that not having money wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was like growing taller, just a natural part of life. This realization opened up a new perspective for me. Next to our apartment was a single-family house where the landlord lived. The landlord, an older man named Mike, seemed to have a soft spot for kids. He was kind to me and even let me visit his house. Despite owning the apartment, Mike lived modestly and spent his days in a practical, no-frills way. I think his lifestyle was typical of a retired man on a pension. Back then, for me, sitting on the carpet in his house and watching TV was a completely new experience. Mike lived alone, so I could visit any time without feeling like I was bothering anyone. I often went to see him, drawn to his kind personality and easygoing demeanor, and he always welcomed me without ever showing any sign of annoyance. Mike taught me little by little what the world outside was really like. "Jessica, want to come over to my place today?" "Yeah, I'll come." "I want to watch a drama." "You're starting to like the same things I do." Watching TV with Mike was so much fun. I think it was the first time I truly enjoyed spending time with someone. And to top it off, Mike often gave me snacks when I visited. They weren't like the fancy treats I used to have, but they had a comforting, homemade charm that I grew to love. Mike seemed to love fruit and often bought seasonal fruits from a nearby fruit store. Through him, I became more attuned to the changing seasons and started to pay attention to the world around me. When I think about what might have happened to me if Mike hadn't been there, it's terrifying. Looking back, I realized that before we moved, I was the very definition of a spoiled child. When we first moved into the old apartment, I hated it so much that I even demanded Mike help us find a different place. The fancy dress-up doll I brought from our previous house felt completely out of place in my new life, and I resented it. One day, overwhelmed by frustration, I threw the doll at Mike. But instead of getting angry, he simply picked it up. He brushed it off gently and handed it back to me. "Listen, Jessica. Right now, you might not like this old apartment, but what truly matters is what's inside. No matter where you live, your worth doesn't change one bit. You have something wonderful inside you, something that shines brightly. Take care of it and help it grow." At the time, I didn't fully understand what Mike meant, but he repeated those words to me many times over the years. Eventually, his message sank in, almost like I memorized it, and it became a part of me. Now, I am deeply grateful to Mike. If we hadn't moved next door to him when I was 10, I would have grown up to be an insufferable, entitled person. Learning about struggles and the value of hard work allowed me to grow far beyond what I had imagined. The time I spent with Mike has become an irreplaceable treasure to me. Mike himself was the one who shone brightly, guiding me through life like a beacon. For my mother, who had just started a job she wasn't used to, it must have been a relief to know that Mike was there to watch over me and provide emotional support. He was truly a benefactor to our little family. Being forced out of our old house was a shocking experience, but I came to believe that every hardship leads to something good. I was able to trust that wholeheartedly. I decided to pursue a career in banking and applied for scholarships to attend college. Of course, this wasn't an easy decision for our family. I considered graduating high school and working right away, but my desire to learn was too strong to ignore. As soon as I entered college, I knew I had made the right choice. The university was full of discovery, and I became completely absorbed in learning. I attended lectures more eagerly than anyone else and soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Even as a college student, I continued writing my reports at Mike's table. For me, his house felt far more comforting than my own room. "Jessica, glad you came by. I've got some cake someone gave me today. Want to share it?" Mike, now with a few more wrinkles than when we first met, would welcome me with a warm smile. I thought about how, once I started earning money at the bank, I would buy Mike a truly special cake, one topped with plenty of fruit. The heater in his room warmed the air, and the kettle on top made a soft whistling sound. Mike always said he didn't need anything more luxurious than this. I often wondered how he would react if I surprised him with something a little fancier. With those thoughts in mind, I threw myself into my studies. But amidst our peaceful lives, something unbelievable happened. Mike suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness. When I heard the news from one of his relatives, I was completely stunned. It felt like the world had turned black and white, as if time itself had stopped moving. The everyday life I thought would last forever ended so abruptly. Mick was no longer in this world. As I began to lose consciousness from the shock, the sound of my mother's sobs beside me pulled me back to reality. After that, the two of us cried until we had no tears left. It seemed we were alone again, just the two of us. It wasn't just sadness, it was an overwhelming sense of loss. The small dream of treating Mick to a fruitcake was now something that could never come true. The comforting place I had known since I was 10 years old was now gone. From that point on, I stopped visiting the house next door and focused on studying alone in our cramped apartment. There was no Mick anymore to tease me when I was stuck on a problem. Whenever I turned on the TV, I'd find reruns of the drama Mick used to love. I couldn't help but feel how strange it was to continue my daily life without him. 2 years passed since those difficult days, and I secured a job offer at a major bank. I wished so badly that I could share the news with Mick. My mother, sensing my feelings, celebrated for both of us with exaggerated enthusiasm. "You did so well. I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life. You've become so accomplished. Mick must be watching over you from up above." "Yes, I think so too. Don't worry, Mom. From now on, I'll make sure you can live comfortably." After making that promise, I devoted myself to my work for the next 20 years. Even for someone like me, though, there were people I didn't get along with. Or rather, there was someone who seemed to view me as an enemy. His name was Steve. He was a little younger than me, likely still in his 30s. Steve joined the bank with great fanfare, as he was the president's son. For someone who should have had no rivals, Steve apparently found me irritating. The reason? I had earned the trust of the vice president. 10 years ago, I had won an in-house award for excellence in customer service. Now, I was in a position to train junior employees in the same field. While it was a bit embarrassing to me, the vice president had called me a role model for other employees. The vice president valued my skills highly. "Jessica, your customer service gives people a sense of reassurance. It's not uncommon for customers to come to us with anxiety. I'd like you to continue doing work that eases those worries. Thank you for your kind words. I'll do my best." Earning the trust of senior executives was something I deeply appreciated, but it came with a downside. Steve became even harsher toward me. He openly referred to me as a thorn in his side. Surrounded by a group of followers who benefited from his influence, Steve lived in an environment where he could say whatever he wanted. As soon as Ted left the room, Steve would start his snide remarks. "Sucking up again. That's about all you're good for, old lady. And nothing like you should stay out of my way. I'm not trying to get in your way. Please, Steve, just focus on your own work." No matter how much I tried to ignore him, he would always find a way to provoke me. He picked apart everything I did, pointing out even the smallest mistakes. I couldn't help but think how much better off he'd be if he directed that obsessive energy toward his own work. "Hey, old lady, I hear you're from a single-mother household." Steve had finally heard about my family situation, probably from someone else. It wasn't surprising. I've never hidden the fact that I grew up in a single-mother household. I don't feel embarrassed about it. In fact, I take pride in having worked hard despite that background. Yes, that's true. I've lived with my mother since I was 10. Seriously? How sad. I can't even imagine what it's like to grow up in a household without both parents. Guess you just had to tough it out and sneak your way into our bank, right? For Steve, the idea of a single-mother household immediately equated to being poor. Sure, living with just my mother wasn't easy, but I didn't think anyone had the right to make assumptions about it. However, Steve wasn't the type to listen to reason. You poor old lady. I guess we'll have to lower the standards of your job, too. It's time for the meeting. Let's head out. We had to go to another branch for a work-related matter, and Steve and I were assigned to handle it together. Steve would always use his influence to take a taxi for the trip. A taxi arrived in front of us, and Steve got in. As I was about to follow, the door slammed shut. Through the door, I could hear Steve's loud voice. People like you should just walk. See you. The taxi drove off. For a moment, I was stunned. But then I realized that it might actually be better than riding with Steve. I began walking toward the station. What surprised me was that when I arrived at our destination, I thought Steve would have already been there, but he was nowhere to be found. After waiting with the client, he showed up 30 minutes late. Sorry, I got stuck in traffic. Thanks for waiting. You were late. You got here after me. At this point, one of the employees from the other branch asked why the two of us had arrived separately. Steve had used some strange privileges to take a taxi. He knew the roads would be crowded, but still left at the last minute. Embarrassed, Steve turned bright red and looked down. He was clearly upset and didn't say a word during the rest of the meeting. There was also the time when I brought a coffee from a cafe to work. Steve scowled and came up to me, criticizing me. Why are you buying such a luxury item? That place costs nearly $10, doesn't it? Trying to act all trendy with that fancy coffee. It doesn't suit you, old lady. I ignored him and sat down at my desk. Perhaps my indifference bothered him because he came closer and knocked my coffee cup over. The coffee spilled everywhere, even soaking into the desk next to mine. I quickly grabbed a cloth and wiped it off. Thankfully, the desk was well organized, and the papers seemed to be fine. The real trouble was the computer. Just as I finished cleaning up the spill, the person at the desk next to me arrived, only to find their computer wouldn't turn on. Apparently, coffee had seeped in and ruined it. I reported Steve's actions to our manager exactly as they happened. I thought he might face disciplinary action, but it seems he only received a verbal warning. The influence of his father, the bank president, was undeniable. The employee at the neighboring desk was forced to endure the inconvenience of not having a functioning computer until a new one could be provided, which was unfortunate. By now, Steve's behavior had escalated beyond something I could handle on my own. It had become a workplace-wide issue. Around this time, a new problem arose. Our branch's customer satisfaction ratings were revealed to be lower than other branches, and an emergency meeting was called. The attendees included the bank president, Steve, 4 of Steve's close associates, and me. As someone known for strong customer service skills, I was invited to the meeting. Originally, Ted, the vice president, was also supposed to attend, but he was called away at the last minute. Beforehand, Ted had explained that he wanted me in the meeting to share solutions as a customer service specialist. I told him I wasn't sure if I could contribute much, but he assured me that my everyday approach to work was worth learning from. However, when the meeting started, the exact opposite happened. No one paid attention to anything I said. It seemed Steve and his group had decided in advance to ignore me completely. Even the president, who didn't get along with Ted, smirked without intervening. The toxic atmosphere in the room made me furious. How could we even begin to identify ways to improve customer service when no one was willing to have a productive discussion? Unable to tolerate it any longer, I raised my voice and insisted on addressing the state of our branch's customer service. For the first time, Steve looked at me and then said something unbelievable. "Fatherless lady, you don't belong in meetings." What does my family background matter? Didn't you hear me? Is your hearing going, old lady? In our industry, trust is everything. Can anyone really trust someone from a single-mother household? What an outrageous argument. Recently, I had been making extra effort to avoid mistakes, knowing Steve was always watching for any opportunity to criticize me. While his snide remarks had subsided, his frustration had clearly built up instead. Now he had crossed the line by attacking something beyond my control, my family background. To stoop so low just to insult someone. Steve's pettiness made me feel almost sorry for him. So, are you saying my input isn't being considered? Of course not. Who cares what an old lady like you thinks? We'll handle the issues. You can quietly pack up and leave. I see. Well, I'll be going then. I left the room with as much confidence as I could muster, but tears welled up once I was alone. At this age, I never thought someone would bring up my single-mother background as an insult. If Mike were here, I wondered what he would have said. Don't worry about it. What matters is what's inside. He would have reassured me. Even now, the 10-year-old girl within me longed for his encouragement. Despite my best efforts to outperform everyone and prove myself, I found myself discouraged by an insurmountable reality. I informed my colleagues that I was leaving early and headed home while the sun was still high. Now I live in a spacious apartment, having moved out of Mike's old place. My early return surprised my mother. Why are you home at this hour? Holding back tears, I took my mother's hands and told her everything that had happened. As I spoke, the anger I had been suppressing began to rise. All the hardships we had endured together, supporting each other through every challenge, for Steve, who knew nothing about us, to dismiss us with a single comment about being from a single-mother household. An indescribable wave of emotion washed over me. My mother must have felt it too, as her expression grew increasingly stern. By the time I finished, her face was red with anger. Without hesitation, my mother picked up the phone and called my bank branch. Hello, this is Emma Wilson. I'd like to withdraw my $1 billion account. I couldn't comprehend what she was saying. Her conversation turned into an argument with no progress being made. When she finally hung up, I asked, What's this about? $1 billion. Where did that kind of money come from? I was planning to keep it a secret from you. She hesitated before continuing. Actually, 23 years ago, after Mike passed away, he left me a significant inheritance. It was a formal bequest specified in his will. His relatives insisted I accept it, but I felt it was too precious to use frivolously, so I decided to invest it. I never imagined my mother had a talent for investing. She explained that she wanted to save it for an emergency. Over the years, she had grown Mike's inheritance into an enormous amount. Although it would have been smarter to diversify the deposits across various banks, she chose to keep it all in my branch because of our connection. This was her way of showing trust in my bank. Steve's actions had betrayed that trust. My mother had always taken pride in the fact that I worked for the bank, but knowing that it was a place where petty harassment occurred was a different matter entirely. As we were discussing this, the doorbell rang. When I answered, I found the bank president, Steve, and Ted standing there. I invited them in, and they all looked surprised. Emma's daughter is Jessica. Apparently so. Even I didn't know my mother had such assets. So, what brings you here? Of course, it's about the withdrawal. To be honest, if you pull out $10 billion, our branch will face serious trouble, Steve said. As usual, he spoke in a calm tone, but there was a subtle edge of panic in his voice. My mother, however, remained composed. The reason is simple. My daughter was told at today's meeting that people from single-mother households are unnecessary. Ted's eyes widened in shock. What? That happened? I'm so sorry. I wasn't present at the meeting. Steve, is this true? Steve reluctantly nodded. What's the meaning of this? Do you think that kind of behavior is acceptable for a professional? It's utterly disgraceful and completely unacceptable. Steve had no excuse. Well, it was just a joke. There are things you can joke about and things you absolutely cannot. Even if it was a joke, your comments are inexcusable. I can no longer trust you in any capacity. Ted quickly apologized to me. He then prompted Steve and the bank president to apologize to my mother and me. Even Steve, who had been so arrogant, couldn't avoid apologizing when $10 billion in deposits was at stake. However, my mother stood firm on her decision and proceeded with withdrawing her funds, forcing the men to leave. The next day at work, I was informed that another meeting would be held, and this time, Ted would attend. I was also instructed to participate. At the meeting, Ted presented several emails, all complaints directed at Steve. It turned out Steve had been receiving complaints by name for some time. Sir, take a look. Your son's performance is far from commendable. To be frank, the quickest way to improve this branch's customer satisfaction is to reassign Steve. What do you think? Tension filled the room. Until now, whenever Steve did something wrong, the bank president and his allies had always shielded him. But with $10 billion withdrawn, someone had to take responsibility. As a result, Steve was reassigned to a meaningless idle position. Since then, I've heard nothing about Steve's reputation. It seems he's living a quiet, unremarkable life, completely out of the spotlight. But for someone as prideful as Steve, that must be the most unbearable thing of all. Additionally, this spring, the bank president will be replaced, and Ted is set to take over. The staff quietly welcomed the change, relieved that a sensible person would be in charge. My mother took this opportunity to distribute her assets among various banks. She had been considering it for a while. This reduces the risk, and in the end, it turned out for the best, she said with a contented smile. With Steve gone, I can now work without stress. The branch's performance has improved, and I've been offered a promotion to branch manager. Of course, I accepted without hesitation. While I'm nervous about the new responsibilities, I'm more excited to see how far I can go. This spring will be a busy time for me. Today marks Mike's Memorial Day. My mother and I visited the grave and offered flowers. We also placed some of Mike's favorite fruits alongside them. Do you remember? Mike always looked out for us. Whenever he went somewhere, he'd bring us souvenirs. It's rare to find a landlord like that. Indeed. Since moving out of Mike's apartment, I've never experienced such a close-knit relationship anywhere else. Looking back, I can truly say we were fortunate to have met Mike when we were at our lowest point. Mike always said Jessica would grow into an amazing person. And look, he was right. I still have a long way to go. Someday, I want to be able to help others just like Mike did. Oh, you're already a daughter I'm proud of. Hearing such unexpected words surprised me. I glanced at my mother and saw her looking at the gravestone with tears in her eyes. Perhaps in front of Mike, she could express her true feelings. Mike helped us even during our hardest times to hold on to our dignity. It's because of that experience that I can confidently say we are who we are today. Though it's sad we had to part ways during our journey, I will always cherish what he gave us and carry it forward. As I stood there lost in thought, someone approached the grave. It was an older man. When I looked closer, I was stunned. It was Ted. Ted, what brings you here? Jessica, what about you? I explained my connection to Mike. Ted nodded deeply. I see. I have a similar story. When I was a student, I lived in Mike's apartment. Let's see. That must have been about 34 years ago. It turned out that Ted and my family had crossed paths, moving in and out of Mike's apartment back to back. The coincidence thrilled us. We excitedly shared memories of the exact same apartment, its unique quirks like scratches on the beams or the color of the lampshades. When I was a student, Mike took great care of me too. He often gave me seasonal fruits. It was the same for me. Mike was so kind to us. Ted glanced at the fruit we had placed on the grave. In his hands was a similar fruit basket. I've been so busy with work that I haven't been able to visit on his memorial days. But maybe because I'm getting older, this year I felt I had to come. And now, running into you here, feels like Mike brought us together. I feel the same way. Meeting you here feels like a special connection. Please tell me more about your memories of Mike. Ted's gentle urging made it feel like we had been lifelong friends. Overcome with emotion, I lost track of time as we shared stories. Despite the cold, Ted truly seemed like someone who had inherited Mike's kindness. Talking to him felt natural, as if I could open up completely. My mother seemed to feel the same. It was as if we had gained another important person in our lives. Though it was still a chilly season, beneath the ground, the signs of spring were stirring. It was a day that reminded us of new beginnings and connections. It read, Middle school dropout bumpkin on the place card. In order to attend the wedding of her boss, Kristen, who is the head of her department at work, my daughter Sabrina left the house. However, she returned home with a dejected countenance about 20 minutes later. I am aware of the amount of effort Sabrina has put out to win Kristen's approval. She has worked nonstop from early in the morning till late at night without ever complaining. Nevertheless, Kristen regarded her as a simple high school dropout without even recognizing her efforts. That is totally unacceptable. Usually, no matter how difficult the situation, Sabrina is able to bounce back. But she was still depressed today. I can't keep quiet any longer. I made the decision to act. After discovering the truth about Sabrina, Kristen, who despises her subordinates, will sincerely regret what she said. Keith Marshall is my name. My age is 51. My daughter, Sabrina, and I currently reside in a 3-bedroom apartment. I have wonderful memories of living in this apartment with my family, but it is too large for the two of us. We have a hard time moving out because of this. When I was 30, I met the love of my life. Sophia was her name. I had limited opportunities to meet women because I had always been focused on my profession. Day after day, my life consisted solely of work and home. I couldn't help but feel jealous as I saw my friends marry and have families one after another. More than anyone else, I want to start my own family. The reason for this is because I grew up in a home with only one parent. I had always wanted to get married and create a family of my own as soon as possible, because my mother had been my only relative from birth. I met Sophia through a friend, and I knew she was the one the instant I laid eyes on her. Fortunately, she thought the same of me, and our friendship swiftly developed into something more. Sophia listened to anything I had to say and always put me before herself. I was confident that I could create the kind of family I had always envisioned with her. That's why I asked her to marry me. We were married 6 months after we first met, so our romance was brief. We became a wonderful couple, nonetheless, as if we had known each other for ages, in spite of the pace. My life got even more satisfying once I married Sophia. All of a sudden, the mundane days seemed more joyful and brighter. I didn't realize how amazing ordinary life might be until I met Sophia. After 5 years of marriage, Sophia confided in me that she was expecting a child. It was our first child, the moment we had been looking forward to. Sophia laughed when I started purchasing baby things before the baby was even born because I was so ecstatic. I knew that after our baby was born, life would be even better than it was when we were just the two of us. I nearly worried that it was too good to be true because I was so delighted. And then, our daughter Sabrina was born. She looked just like Sophia, fair skin and big, beautiful eyes. She was so adorable that I finally understood what people meant when they said, "I love them so much I could put them in my eye, and it wouldn't hurt." With more responsibility on my shoulders, I worked even harder. At that time, I had been entrusted with a major project, so even though I wanted to rush home every day, I forced myself to stay late at work. About 6 months into that life, I began to notice something strange. "Sophia, have you lost some weight?" When I asked her, she responded casually, "Maybe it's just because I'm not used to taking care of a baby yet. But I don't think it's that noticeable." At that time, I was leaving home early in the morning and coming back late at night because of work. That meant I had left all the housework and childcare to Sophia alone. "I'm sorry for making you do everything. I'll take over on my days off, so please take it easy," I said, hoping to give her some relief. But she shook her head. "It's fine. You're working hard for us, aren't you? Taking care of the house and the baby is my job. You don't have to worry about it." She smiled as she spoke. That smile looked like an angel's. Seeing it made me even more determined to work hard. At that time, I had no idea what was happening to Sophia's body. A silent illness was slowly taking its toll on her. "Keith, have a great day. I made your favorite hamburger steak for lunch today. Do your best at work." That day, I was scheduled for a one-night business trip to the neighboring town. I had been nervous about an important business deal since the day before, but Sophia had prepared a special packed lunch for me. I never talked to her about my work. I didn't want her to worry unnecessarily. Yet, even without me saying anything, she always tried to understand my job and cheered me on. She even put me before herself at times. I loved her with all my heart, and there wasn't a single day I didn't feel grateful for marrying her. "All right, I'm heading out. Take care of Sabrina." With those words, I left home as usual. Sophia held Sabrina in her arms and saw me off until I disappeared from view. I never imagined that would be the last time I saw her looking healthy. I arrived at my business meeting venue. As I was reviewing materials before the deal, I felt the usual nervousness. I had been through many major negotiations before, but no matter how many times I experienced it, the tension never faded. Each time, I would picture Sophia and Sabrina's faces to motivate myself. Just minutes before the meeting was about to start, my phone suddenly rang loudly. I wondered who it could be at such a crucial moment. To my surprise, it was Sophia's mother calling. She almost never called me, so a sense of unease immediately filled my chest. I answered right away, and her panicked voice came through. "Keith, something terrible has happened." "What?" Her next words made me doubt my own ears. "Sophia collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital. Can you come right away?" My vision went dark. She was perfectly fine this morning. What in the world was happening? I had to get to her immediately. With that thought, I quickly explained the situation to my business partners and rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, Sophia was lying quietly in the hospital bed, connected to a ventilator. Beside her, her parents were holding Sabrina, tears streaming down their faces. Sabrina, too young to understand anything, was laughing innocently. The doctors say Sophia had a progressive illness. It's already in the final stage. She only has a few days left. I was speechless. I couldn't comprehend the thought of Sophia leaving this world. Was it my fault? Had she gotten sick because I left all the housework and child care to her? Why didn't I realize Sophia's illness sooner? My mind was in complete chaos, spiraling into panic. But as I sat there in despair, Sophia's father began speaking to me in a calm, steady voice. Sophia had always dreamed of getting married and having children. When you two decided to get married, she was overjoyed. She told us she had finally met someone who truly understood her. She wanted to do her best for you, Keith. So don't ever think she was unhappy. She was truly happy. I couldn't stop my tears. I held Sophia's hand tightly and called out to her over and over. "Sophia, please come back. I can't live without you." But there was no response. For the next 3 days and nights, I stayed at the hospital, leaving Sabrina in the care of my in-laws. I wanted to be by Sophia's side when she woke up. Then, on the third night, a miracle happened. Despite the doctors saying she would never regain consciousness, Sophia slowly opened her eyes and looked at me. "Sophia, Can you hear me? I'll call the doctor right now." As I said that, tears welled up in her eyes, and in a barely audible voice, she spoke. "Keith, I'm sorry for causing trouble with your work." Even in her suffering, she was worried about me. That was just like Sophia. But I didn't care about work. I cared about her. "What are you talking about?" Tears streamed down my face. With the last of her strength, she said one final thing to me. "Keith, please take care of Sabrina. I'm sorry for being a bad wife." And with that, Sophia quietly closed her eyes. That was our last conversation. The funeral was held without issue, and time moved on as if nothing had happened. No matter how much time passed, the sorrow of losing Sophia left me unable to function. The job I had once worked so hard for no longer motivated me. I simply went through the motions, doing the bare minimum to get by. One day, after finishing work, I went to pick up Sabrina from daycare. There she was, waiting for me with a bright, beaming smile. She ran up to me and said, "You look tired. Sabrina will make you feel better." She had just turned 2. A tiny child already worrying about me. At that moment, I went back to my original feelings and remembered the day Sabrina was born. When she was born, I swore that I would make her happy. I had to pull myself together. Sophia would have wanted that too. I decided then and there to put my grief aside and become the best father I could be for Sabrina. I had relied too much on my in-laws, so I started making an effort to rebuild our lives on my own. I worked harder to finish early so I could pick up Sabrina from daycare myself. Even though I wasn't good at cooking, I practiced using the recipes Sophia had left behind. Every day was a struggle as I navigated household chores, but I did my best. "Dad, your curry is the best." Sabrina always praised my cooking. Those words became my motivation. Before I knew it, my once tiny little girl had grown from an elementary schooler into a middle schooler. "Dad, you left your socks inside out in the laundry again. You need to fix them before washing, or they won't get properly cleaned." "Oh. Oh, right. Sorry. Geez, get it together. Your lunch is on the table, so don't forget to take it with you." "Thanks, as always." Sabrina had become such a responsible young woman. Even though she was at an age where she probably wanted to go out and have fun with her friends, she took care of me, helped around the house, and did so much for our home. Her voice, her expressions, she was just like Sophia. To me, Sabrina was both my daughter and, in some ways, like a mother figure. Then, when she was in her 3rd year of middle school, she called me into the living room with a serious expression. I had no idea what she was about to say, but what she told me was completely unexpected. "Dad, I've made up my mind." "Huh? About what? Is there something you want to do?" Whenever Sabrina spoke to me in such a serious tone, it usually meant she wanted something from me. So I listened casually, expecting a simple request. "No, that's not it. I'm not going to high school. I decided to start working after middle school." I couldn't believe my ears. "What? But you always said you wanted to study English in high school." Sabrina was an excellent student, especially in English. Her homeroom teacher, Mr. Irwin, had even assured me that she was capable of getting into a prestigious high school. I had never once doubted that she would take the entrance exams. So what was she thinking now? I was completely caught off guard. Seeing me speechless, Sabrina continued. "I want to get out into the real world as soon as possible." I had always tried to respect Sabrina's decisions, and I wanted to continue doing so. But this was different. I couldn't stay silent. "You should think this through a little more. Japan is still a society where education matters. If you start working with just a middle school diploma, you're going to face a lot of struggles." Even after hearing my concerns, Sabrina remained firm. "No matter what you say, this is what I've decided. I've thought it through carefully." I was at a loss. But in the end, seeing how determined she was, I had no choice but to accept her decision. Eventually, Sabrina received a job offer from a company, and after graduating from middle school, she officially started working. Then came the first day at work. I was even more nervous than Sabrina. What if she couldn't fit in because of her educational background? The thought made me restless. To support her, I had bought her a nice suit as a gift. Sabrina laughed and said, "Dad, you're worrying too much. I'll be fine." But I wanted to do everything I could for her. Meanwhile, Sabrina seemed genuinely excited about starting her new job. I want to become someone who contributes to the company as soon as possible. As we left the house together, she waved her hand energetically and walked into the company building. As I watched, I prayed that Sabrina would be able to work safely and without trouble. That evening, I decided to cook a special meal to celebrate her first day. But even after I finished cooking, she still hadn't come home. I waited anxiously for Sabrina to return. Finally, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I rushed to the entrance. There stood Sabrina, looking utterly exhausted. She must have been drained from her first day at work. "Are you okay? I made all your favorite dishes. Let's eat together." Even when I said that, Sabrina didn't look up. "Sorry, Dad. I need to write everything down before I forget what I learned today. Can you eat without me?" Then she went upstairs without another word. Sabrina, who had always loved eating, had never once turned down a meal like this before. I was confused. Had something happened at work? The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. That night, she never came back downstairs. The next morning, I woke up and went to check on Sabrina, but she had already left. However, on the dining table, she had neatly prepared my breakfast and packed my lunch. At that moment, I convinced myself that she was simply doing her best as a working adult. But from that day on, a gap began to form between us. Sabrina had been leaving early in the morning and coming home late at night, working long hours. Even though we lived in the same house, there were days when we didn't see each other at all. One night, after weeks of this routine, she finally came home while I was still awake. And the moment I saw her face, I noticed something. "What happened? Have you been crying?" She seemed startled, as if she hadn't expected me to be up. "Oh, Dad, you're still awake." Looking at her closely for the first time in a while, I realized she looked exhausted. Her once round face had become noticeably thinner. Was her job really that tough? The thought worried me. Cautiously, I asked her about work. Did something happen at work? At my question, Sabrina suddenly broke down in tears. She had never been one to cry easily, even as a child. No matter what happened, she always held back her tears. For her to be crying now, it had to be something serious. I gently stroked her head, and she sobbed even harder before finally speaking. Actually, what she told me next left me speechless. Her colleagues had been looking down on her for being a middle school graduate. Worse yet, her direct supervisor, Kristen, had been treating her terribly. Kristen was a highly educated woman who had graduated from a prestigious university. Because of that, she seemed to see Sabrina as inferior, making her the target of her contempt. A boss treating their subordinate that way. It was unacceptable. I felt rage boiling up inside me. This wasn't just unfair. It was completely wrong. "I'll go talk to that boss of yours," I blurted out in anger. But Sabrina immediately grabbed my arm, her eyes desperate. "Dad, please don't. I'll handle this on my own. If I work hard and prove myself, Kristen will have to acknowledge me." Then, without another word, she went upstairs and started studying. When she was little, I used to take care of everything for her. But now she didn't need me to fight her battles. She was determined to carve out her own future. All I could do as her father was stand by and support her. The frustration of not being able to help weighed on me, but I cheered her on with all my heart. Even after that night, she continued studying diligently every evening after work. I was sure that eventually, Her efforts would be recognized at the company. Or so I believed. One day, Sabrina started getting dressed in a fancy dress, something she rarely wore. She told me she was attending Kristen's wedding. "Do you think this outfit looks okay?" She asked me the same question multiple times, clearly anxious. "Yeah, you look great. You look beautiful." "Good. If I show up to the wedding looking bad on top of being a middle school graduate, who knows what Kristen will say about me?" "Yeah, just go and try to enjoy yourself." Hearing my words, she nodded, took a deep breath, and left the house looking determined. After the wedding, she was also planning to attend the after-party, so she had told me she'd be home late. Maybe I should go out for a drink myself for the first time in a while. As I was thinking about that, an incident happened. 20 minutes after Sabrina left, she came back with tear-streaked eyes. Sabrina's face was filled with sorrow. "What happened? Did you forget something?" I asked in shock. But what she said next was beyond anything I could have imagined. When I arrived at the wedding venue and walked inside, my place card said, "Middle School Graduate Bumpkin." Middle School Graduate Bumpkin. Did her boss really do something this cruel? I was at a loss for words. I knew how hard Sabrina had worked to gain Kristen's approval. Every day, from early morning to late at night, she put in her best effort without a single complaint. And yet, without even acknowledging that effort, Kristen mocked her, just for not having a high school diploma. Unacceptable. Did no one at the wedding say anything about it? When I said that, Sabrina nodded quietly. I was even more appalled. Normally, no matter how difficult things got, Sabrina was always able to shake them off and move forward. But this time, the sadness lingered. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Well, how interesting. I didn't think people like that still existed, people who actively try to bring others down. Hearing my words, Sabrina lowered her head. Kristen was completely unfit to be a boss. And as for her co-workers, how could they just stand by and do nothing? I had made up my mind. I was going to take action. The next day, I headed to a certain place. When I arrived and opened the door, a woman quickly approached me. "Mr. Marshall, what brings you here? Is there some kind of issue?" She seemed flustered. "Oh, there's a huge issue, Kristen. Your department seems to be engaging in inappropriate behavior toward new employees." "What? That's not true at all." Kristen was trying to play innocent. "That's right. I was the president of the very company Kristen and Sabrina worked for. I couldn't stand by and watch my daughter suffer any longer, so I came directly to her office. Had Kristen shown even the slightest sign of remorse, I might have reconsidered. But instead, she tried to cover up her actions. Seeing this, I made my decision. I built this company with the vision of creating a workplace where everyone is treated fairly and can enjoy working. If even one employee is suffering because of discrimination, then something needs to change. Kristen looked at me with a confused expression. Then, I raised my voice so that everyone in the office could hear. This department has made it clear that it judges people based on their education rather than their abilities. If this continues, it will be disastrous. To prevent that, I'm shutting down this entire department, effective immediately. Every single one of you is fired. A wave of shock spread through the office. The employees went pale, and Kristen looked like she was about to panic. "Why would you do this? If you shut down this department, the company won't function properly. No one here has ever judged people based on their education." Kristen was trembling as she desperately tried to defend herself. Then, from a quiet corner of the room, Sabrina stood up. "Dad?" She stared at me, wide-eyed in shock. I hadn't told her about my plan to dissolve the department. She must have been completely caught off guard. But the person who was the most stunned was Kristen. "Dad?" Sabrina's father is Mr. Marshall. As she whispered this in disbelief, murmurs began spreading through the office. "Wait, the middle school graduate's father is our president?" "No way. This has to be a joke. They were whispering, but I could hear everything. Thinking about how this prejudice against academic background had caused Sabrina so much pain, I couldn't help but raise my voice. Sabrina is my only daughter, and I will never forgive anyone who hurts her. It wouldn't have mattered if it was Sabrina or someone else. The result would have been the same. Now, pack your things. As soon as I said that, the office was thrown into chaos. The employees finally seemed to understand the reality of the situation. This is too much. We've dedicated ourselves to this company. How can you just fire us like this? Kristen's face turned red with frustration as she lashed out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her words only fueled my anger. An employee who truly cares about this company would work to make it better. Instead, you've done the opposite. You've judged a new hire based on her education rather than her abilities. That goes against everything this company stands for. Employees like you have no place here. But the fact remains, Sabrina is a middle school graduate. It's only natural that people would see her differently. Everyone in this office worked hard to earn their college degrees just to get into this company. At her words, the other employees nodded in agreement. And whether someone is a middle school graduate or a college graduate, the moment they join this company, they're all part of the same team. It's your outdated mindset that has ruined this department. Kristen looked down in frustration after hearing my words. Everyone in the office seemed overwhelmed with a sense of despair. After Sophia passed away, I originally worked as a salesman at a large corporation. The job was demanding. I traveled all over the country for business negotiations. For over 10 years, I worked relentlessly. But after losing Sophia, I realized that I needed to change my work style if I wanted to raise Sabrina properly. I consulted my company about adjusting my workload, but they wouldn't accommodate me. So, I made the difficult decision to resign. At the time, I thought I would find another job quickly. But I was wrong. Finding a new position was much harder than I expected. Seeing me struggle, my father-in-law approached me with an unexpected offer. Keith, you were a great husband to Sophia, and now you're a father to Sabrina. I want to support you both, so I have a proposal for you. Then, my father-in-law began making a shocking proposal. You know that I'm the president of M Corporation, right? I'm getting old, and I've been thinking about retiring. If you're willing, I want you to take over as the next president. I was stunned. M Corporation was a leading company in its industry, holding the top market share in the country. There was no way I could handle such a massive responsibility. That's what I thought. Seeing my hesitation, my father-in-law continued to persuade me. I won't retire immediately. I'll take my time training you. You won't be thrown into it blindly. Even so, it was a completely different industry from what I was used to. I didn't feel confident at all. But then he said something that changed my mind. Being a company president is tough, but compared to your sales job, you'll have much more control over your time. That flexibility will help you raise Sabrina on your own. He was right. I still doubted whether I was capable, but for Sabrina's sake, I agreed. And so, I became the president of this company, dedicating myself to making it a workplace where people could thrive. In the silent office, Sabrina suddenly raised her voice. Dad, no. This isn't their fault. The reason they look down on me is because I haven't proven myself yet. It's my fault. What? Sabrina suddenly started saying that it was her fault. After everything she had endured, she still believed she was to blame. If I work harder and prove myself, I know Kristen and the others will stop looking down on me. So please, don't disband this department or fire anyone. Just give me more time to improve. With that, Sabrina bowed deeply in front of me. Everyone in the office looked on in disbelief. No one had expected the person they had been mocking to defend them. I hesitated, unsure of what to do, but seeing Sabrina's determination, I decided to reveal the truth behind her decision to work here. Sabrina chose to join this company for my sake. Everyone held their breath, listening intently. Sabrina has always been my greatest supporter. When she decided to work here instead of continuing her education, she got down on her knees and begged me to let her join. She told me she wanted to help me and this company. She didn't do it for herself. She did it for us. Sabrina didn't join this company for herself at all. She did it for me and for the company. Kristen's eyes were slightly filled with tears. I had no idea this was the reason, Kristen muttered. Then suddenly, she dropped to her knees and bowed deeply before Sabrina. Sabrina, I always knew how hard you worked. You were always the first to arrive, cleaning the office to make it a better place for everyone. You stayed late to finish your work, never cutting corners. You diligently took notes on everything new you learned, which is why you were improving so quickly. So the truth is, you're not the one who needs to try harder. It's me. I'm the one who needs to change. I'm so sorry for everything. Kristen's voice trembled as she apologized, tears streaming down her face. Following her lead, the rest of the employees also knelt down in apology. We are truly sorry, Sabrina. Hearing their words, Sabrina began to cry. I'll keep working hard so that no one ever says I'm incompetent, just because I didn't graduate high school. Kristen reached out and shook Sabrina's hand firmly. Watching this, I knew things would be okay from now on. No matter what challenges arose, I could trust these people to support each other and make this department stronger. This whole ordeal had forged an unbreakable bond between them. Well then, it looks like there's no need to shut this department down. Kristen, you're one of the most capable leaders in this company. Just make sure you never judge people by their education again. Hearing this, Kristen gave me a sincere smile. Of course, Sabrina helped me change my perspective. I'm going to start fresh and do my best. As soon as she said that, applause erupted throughout the office. Since that day, Sabrina never came home with a gloomy expression again. She still left early for work, but now she returned home at a reasonable hour. Since that incident, Kristen seemed to have reconsidered how she assigned tasks, and as a result, work had become more efficient. Dad, I'm going out for drinks with Kristen tonight, so I'll be home late. All right, have fun. The very same Kristen who once looked down on Sabrina was now going out drinking with her. Recently, they had even gone on trips together. Thinking about how close they had become, I couldn't help but wonder, if things had started out this way, wouldn't it have saved everyone so much trouble? Sabrina had also become more open with her colleagues and now enjoyed going to work every day. That one incident had turned everything around. Life is a constant lesson. I don't know what the future holds, but from now on, I'll keep moving forward, enjoying life as it comes. If you can't interpret this in 5 minutes, you risk losing your job. My manager Scott throws a pile of Japanese documents on my desk. Despite being a worldwide organization, even in our New York office, communication in Japanese is still required. However, this seems like outright harassment. I feel like he's stuck in the Stone Age because everything is on paper. It would take at least half an hour just to read through this mound. Why should he have the power to terminate me in the first place, really? I give him a cunning smile and meet his eyes. Are you even capable of firing me? I don't mean to offend, but you're only a manager, right? Scott freezes, as he should, taken by surprise. At that moment, multiple footsteps and the sound of high heels reverberate along the corridor. A woman with jet black hair rushes up to me as soon as the door opens and gives me a tight hug. Of course, I return the embrace and give her a quick kiss in greeting. All eyes turn to the bunch of savage guys standing behind her, and everyone in the room looks on in disbelief. I'm 42 years old and go by Alan Smith. Although my job requires me to travel to several places, I typically reside in Japan. I still have a lot more locations to see, though, and I can't help but be struck by how big the world is. I'm currently back in the United States, where I was born, for a variety of reasons. But even now that I'm back, I don't miss America all that much. To be honest, I don't remember much of my early years spent here. When I was in first grade, my parents separated, leaving my father and me alone. I became resentful since my mother's absence left our house feeling chilly and empty. However, I was treated kindly by a Japanese woman who was staying with a family in the neighborhood during that time, and I soon became close to her. Naturally, as I spent more time with her, I started learning Japanese. In this sense, while being an American by birth, I spent a large portion of my youth immersed in Japanese culture and language. Calling it fate may seem theatrical, but I had the impression that a higher power was attempting to bind me to Japan. As if to complete the transaction, my mother then unexpectedly contacted me in the 8th grade and extended an invitation for me to visit Japan. By that time, she was employed in Japan's fashion sector and had remarried a Japanese guy. When it came time to make decisions about my high school plans, my father, my homeroom teacher, and I got together to talk. Alan has extraordinary intelligence and skill. Anything he sets his mind to, he will succeed. Such opportunities are not often seen. Although I understand that it may be difficult for you, I believe he need to visit Japan. Well, I'll figure something out if Alan goes. Getting in the way of my son's future is the one thing I will never do. I gave it careful thought and listened to the adults before deciding to travel to Japan. I felt as though I would never be able to have that experience if I remained in America. I wasn't sure of anything at first, and I was totally lost. Fortunately, though, I had a big edge because I speak Japanese fluently. My Japanese was refined and exquisite, as the woman who had taught it to me apparently hailed from a wealthy family. I was sometimes invited into the world of high society, and there were even rumors that I might be descended from nobility. However, equality has always been at the heart of my thinking. Whether someone is a noble who's never known financial struggles or an immigrant working hard to make ends meet, I see them all as respectable individuals. Living this way naturally drew people to me, and by the time I was in college, I had built an extensive network of connections. After graduating, I joined one of Japan's top department store chains, and that's where I met Arisa. She was a stunning woman with jet black hair, as beautiful as a movie star. For someone like me, short and a little on the chubby side, she fell far out of my league. But Arisa was head over heels for me, and I, too, came to see her as someone I wanted to cherish with all my heart. After a year of a smooth and happy relationship, I married Arisa. My life was fulfilling, both personally and professionally. Then trouble arose. A whistleblower report revealed issues at the American branch of our company. To verify the truth of the matter firsthand, I decided to infiltrate the American branch myself. This time, the target was Scott Redford, the sales manager of the American branch. Scott graduated from a prestigious national university in Japan and started his career at a major bank. 5 years ago, he was recruited from the bank to help establish the American branch of our company. A year later, he was appointed sales manager. Now, at 38 years old and single, he's not a heavy drinker or anything, but he's not exactly sociable either. He has no friends to hang out with after work. According to the report sent to Japan, he seems to have a policy of avoiding unnecessary interactions with other employees. From this point on, I need to stay close and investigate what kind of person he is, and what exactly the issues might be. I considered sending one of my subordinates, but since this issue occurred in America, I decided to take the lead myself. Thus, I set foot in America for the first time in a long while. The distinct atmosphere of America enveloped me. To be honest, I'm not particularly fond of this air. If it weren't for work, I wouldn't consider staying here for an extended period. For now, I sent my luggage to the hotel, hailed a cab, and headed straight to the American branch. Our U.S. branch operates 3 locations in Washington, New York, and Los Angeles, and is recognized as a major company even in the American market. Although we haven't been in America for long, our brand has gained popularity as a part of Japanese culture, generating substantial profits, especially during holidays and special occasions. The taxi carrying me stopped in front of our 7-story corporate building. I'd heard that the sales department was on the 5th floor, so I took the elevator straight there. The floor was fairly spacious, with enough distance between desks to provide some breathing room. However, I couldn't help but think that the lack of partitions between workstations might be a slight issue. For now, I headed toward the manager's desk at the back and called out to Scott. "My name is Alan Smith. As of today, I've been assigned to the sales department at the American branch. I'm a mid-career hire, so there are still many things I need to learn, but I'll do my best. I look forward to working with you." "Oh, so you're the guy I heard about. I was expecting someone a bit more impressive looking, but you're just a short, stocky old man. Well, no time to waste. We're heading to Asence's office, so you'll be driving." The documents I had handed over to Scott intentionally omitted my exact academic background, presenting me simply as a mid-level employee. From day one, I played the role of an incompetent rookie. Even with a GPS, I struggled on the roads of America, which had changed drastically since the last time I drove here. Not knowing any back roads, I ended up being 15 minutes late to the appointment despite leaving early. The client didn't seem particularly bothered, but Scott's anger was intense, turning the car ride back into something straight out of hell. He berated me in English the entire way, jabbed me in the ribs with his elbow, and even slapped the back of my head with his hand. To make matters worse, there were still 3 more clients I had to visit for introductions. By the time I finished writing the reports and returned to the hotel, I collapsed into bed, sleeping like a rock. Despite being treated as nothing more than a chauffeur on my first day, I began gathering information under Scott's nose. I actively joined my sales department colleagues for drinks, gradually learning more about the internal dynamics and relationships within the office. During one such drinking session, one of the employees grumbled, "I don't know what kind of achievements got him to where he is, but having a guy like that as a boss is a nightmare. I honestly don't see anything remotely competent about him." Exactly. He has no compassion for his subordinates, and there's nothing about him that feels approachable. But he's incredibly good at nitpicking others' faults. It's gotten to the point where just coming to work feels dreadful. In any case, Scott's reputation within the sales department was abysmal. Given his academic background and previous job, he could be considered a so-called elite, and he was certainly aware of it. However, working with him revealed that his only standout skill was taking credit for others' accomplishments. His actual ability seemed far lower than what the public or recruiters in the industry might expect. Spending more time near him, I also realized that Scott was quite the Japanophile. Perhaps the reason he accepted the offer to join the company was simply because the headquarters was in Japan. During breaks, he would brew green tea with an expensive-looking teapot and indulge in it as if it were some grand ritual. But his Japanese was difficult to understand. Whenever someone spoke better Japanese than him, his hostility would be palpable, so the other employees were careful around him. One day, I had the opportunity to answer a work call and spoke in Japanese for a while. When I hung up and looked up, there was Scott, standing beside me, his face twisted into a terrifying expression. "You never mentioned you could speak Japanese. Have you lived in Japan for a long time?" "No, not really. I just enjoy Japanese movies, that's all." "Don't lie. There's no way watching movies could make you that fluent. You don't trust your boss, do you? Fine. If that's the case, I'll treat you accordingly." From that day on, Scott became openly hostile toward me. He started assigning me unnecessarily time-consuming tasks, turning my workload into a grueling nightmare. Just because I was more proficient in Japanese than he was, he resorted to these petty acts of harassment. It only proved how small-minded he truly was. Scott seemed determined to convince everyone around us that my Japanese skills weren't as good as they seemed. Of course, No one else cared who spoke better Japanese, but for Scott, it was a monumental issue. That afternoon, a video conference with the headquarters in Japan was scheduled, limited to department heads. Exhausted from pulling an all-nighter to input data into the computer, I was already at my limit. Then Scott approached my desk and dumped a mountain of Japanese documents onto it. If you can't translate this in 5 minutes, you're fired. Apparently, the documents were materials for the meeting with headquarters that Scott had volunteered to handle entirely on his own and then had someone print out. But this could only be described as harassment. The fact that it was all on paper made him seem outdated, and the sheer volume, enough to take 30 minutes just to read through, was ridiculous. Even the most talented translator couldn't finish this in 5 minutes, and the meeting was fast approaching. I felt an uncontrollable surge of anger. Repeatedly harassing a coworker just because we didn't get along. Threatening to fire me. This was the behavior of an incompetent man. And why should I, of all people, have to fear being fired by someone like him? By now, I had already completed my mission of gathering all the data related to the misconduct at the American branch. Everything that needed to be done was done, and in a few days, I planned to vanish without a trace. After that, I'd leave the rest to the experts and wait for the report back in Japan. But before that, I wanted to see Scott utterly frustrated. I intentionally put on a sly grin and stared directly at him. Do you even have the authority to fire me? No offense, but aren't you just a manager? Even Scott couldn't hide his discomfort, suppressing a grunt. Just then, the sound of high heels and numerous footsteps echoed down the hallway. The moment the door opened, a woman with jet black hair rushed in and threw her arms around me. I instinctively embraced her and greeted her with a light kiss, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Everyone in the room turned pale as they noticed a group of brawny men standing behind her. The woman with jet black hair was none other than my wife, Ariza. Standing at 5'9", with strikingly bold features, she always stood out in a crowd. She's 38 now, but during her late teens and early 20s, she had juggled school with a career as a model. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I'm only 5'7" tall and have a stocky build. Whenever the two of us went out together, we often received curious stares. Not that it mattered to either of us. We couldn't care less what others thought. I had told Ariza that I was on a business trip and returned to America alone, making sure to video call her every night from the hotel. She's a bit of a clingy person, and every night she'd tell me, I wish you'd come home soon, which was honestly a little difficult to handle. And then, as it turns out, she couldn't bear the loneliness any longer and came to America herself. In fluent English, Arissa spoke to me, exasperated but playful. If you were going to come to America, why didn't you bring me along? You know how much I love America. You're right, I'm sorry. But this is an important job. Even if we had come together, I wouldn't have been able to spend much time with you. I'm fine being left alone. Just being in the same place as you, breathing the same air, makes me happy. When Arissa speaks English, she directly translates the first words that come to mind in her native language. Because of that, her English can sometimes sound a bit dramatic or overly poetic. Still, whether in English or Japanese, her love for America always comes through in a way that's pleasant to hear. Maybe I'm biased because I'm in love with her, but I tend to be more forgiving when it comes to evaluating her language skills. At that moment, Scott cut in. Ariza, didn't you hate America? When I asked you out, you turned me down, saying, that's why I don't like Americans. I never said I disliked all Americans. I just don't like you. I've always loved America as a country and its culture. But I didn't marry Alan because he's American. I married him because he's Alan. Arissa has always had a deep admiration for America. She even graduated from one of the public Ivies in America. I was genuinely surprised to learn that Arissa and Scott had met before. She had once told me about a male classmate who persistently pursued her during college, but I never imagined that person was Scott. Oriza first came to America when she was in 3rd grade. Her father was a huge admirer of America, but he moved his family there to seek medical treatment for his frail wife. Miraculously, after continued treatment, her mother's health improved rapidly, and within a year, she had made a full recovery. Deeply moved by this, Oriza's father developed a strong attachment to America and began visiting frequently. Oriza, too, grew to love the country that had healed her mother and eventually came back as an exchange student in middle school. When it was time for high school, she chose to stay in America instead of returning to Japan. Her striking beauty, jet black hair, and elegant features quickly made her well known in high school, and she later went on to attend an American university. That's why she speaks fluent English and can communicate with me so effortlessly. Maybe in some way, the fact that I'm American was part of the reason she chose to marry me, but considering she passed over someone like Scott, who could be considered conventionally handsome, and instead chose someone as plain-looking as me, I have to say Oriza is definitely one of a kind. Scott clearly wasn't happy about it. Why him? How did I lose to a guy who looks like that? What kind of tricks does a man like you have to pull to win over a woman like her? I didn't really know what to tell him. Maybe it's just that for Oriza, I was the one. And for me, she was the only one on this planet. Scott's jaw dropped in disbelief, his expression frozen in shock. That's when I finally realized that the surrounding employees had been listening to the entire exchange. I felt a bit embarrassed, but at this point, it was time to reveal my true identity to everyone. Luckily, Scott ended up doing it for me, so I didn't have to say a word. You're married to Oriza. That means you're part of the executive board, aren't you? I knew the chairman had a thing for America, but I never imagined he'd let his daughter marry someone like you. Executive board? No, I hold the highest position here. The former chairman collapsed, and his son-in-law stepped in as his successor. As an employee, you should already know that, shouldn't you? Oriza's father, my father-in-law, was the chairman of this department store chain. From the moment I married Oriza, it was already decided that I would eventually take on the responsibility of leading the company. Scott looked utterly baffled, his expression frozen in disbelief. What makes you and me so different? I'm a serious man, and I have the height to stand next to Oriza without embarrassing her. Oh, so what? You're really trying to say that you're handsome. You're ridiculous. Women don't choose their husbands based on height or looks, at least, I don't. And honestly, marrying Alan has made me the happiest woman in the world. Scott was left speechless, unable to come up with a retort. Scott, who had always been a fan of Japanese culture, now found himself face to face with a tall, jet black-haired beauty of the same age as him. What's more, they had been in the same university in the same department. It was impossible for her not to catch his eye. It wasn't hard to imagine that plenty of confident men had confessed their feelings to her back then, but Teresa had never thought of herself as particularly beautiful. She was completely indifferent to her own looks. Scott had, to some extent, already made peace with the fact that it was all in the past. What bothered Scott more was the fact that I, the chairman of the company, had gone out of my way to return to America and engage in what seemed like espionage. Scott refrained from persistently pressing the issue about Oriza and instead redirected his focus and frustration toward me. Why did you hide your identity and show up in front of me like this? If you're the chairman of the company, why not just live a comfortable life in Japan? It's true that under normal circumstances, the only time I'd return to America would be around New Year's. However, the stage for the first major problem since I became chairman was set in America. Even though I live in Japan and have a Japanese wife, the patriotism deep within me has never disappeared. Sure, I don't hold particularly strong feelings for America, but that doesn't mean my roots have changed. They never will. Living abroad, I'm reminded every day of the fact that I am American. No matter how much I love Japan, I can never truly become Japanese. At the end of the day, I'm still an American, and there's no way I can simply ignore the country that shaped who I am. When a major scandal erupted at one of our branches here in America, a place so deeply tied to my identity, I couldn't just turn a blind eye. While I have plenty of trustworthy subordinates, I felt a strong need to see the situation with my own eyes. In reality, the issue hasn't surfaced publicly yet. Our department store chain has maintained steady sales and is gradually expanding, even amidst the unstable global economy. However, as the saying goes, a single tiny knoll can bring down a great dam. Even the smallest issue can shake the very foundation. This mission required someone who was either American or fluent in English. So I decided that if I were to conduct an undercover investigation in America, I might as well see everything with my own eyes. That's how I volunteered for the role of spy. When I first heard Scott's name, it didn't ring a bell. As the chairman of a global department store chain, it wouldn't have been unusual for me to know the names of department heads at the American branch. However, since he wasn't a founding member of the branch, but rather someone recruited later through headhunting, I let it slide. If the allegations turned out to be true, I initially thought I might extend some leniency after considering Scott's personality. At first, I approached him with that level of kindness and understanding. But sadly, after dealing with him firsthand, it became clear that he wasn't someone deserving of such compassion. On top of that, I had no idea about his connection with Arissa during their university days here. I couldn't afford to make the wrong decision. Ensuring that this wouldn't negatively impact future management was critical. I lowered my gaze to Scott's wrist, noticing the watch he was wearing. By the way, are you a collector of luxury watches? You seem to have quite the knowledge about them. Scott's shoulders twitched slightly, and his face turned visibly pale. No, I wouldn't say I have any special knowledge. I own 3 or 4 watches as a hobby, but they're not exactly the most expensive ones. Besides, with your position, you must meet Arab billionaires now and then, right? Surely their collections are far superior. It's well known that wealthy individuals consider luxury watches as part of their assets, and those kinds of high-end timepieces aren't typically sold in regular department stores. In America, the watches that American collectors covet are in the range of hundreds of thousands to tens of millions of dollars. Even at the 3 American branches of our company, watches in that price range are part of the inventory. But if those items were ever funneled elsewhere or misappropriated, it would cause a massive scandal capable of shaking the entire American branch. I fixed my gaze firmly on Scott's eyes. The reason I infiltrated the American branch was due to allegations of luxury watches being siphoned off within the branch. A whistleblower brought the issue to me as the chairman, and after discussions with the executive board, it was decided that I would conduct the investigation myself. The president of the American branch fully cooperated with this investigation, allowing me access to the hidden ledger data that Scott had been concealing. With that, I was able to secure solid evidence. I pulled a small USB drive out of my pocket and gave it a subtle wave. Is that the hidden ledger data? Exactly. All the evidence is right here. I nodded firmly, gripping the USB drive tightly before slipping it back into my pocket. If the former chairman finds out that such corruption was taking place at the American branch he loved so much, he would be heartbroken. On top of that, I've also gotten a good look at the atmosphere within the branch. All of this will serve as valuable insight for the future growth of our company. What's going to happen to me? I'm willing to accept a salary cut. Just don't fire me. When I was promoted to sales manager, I went ahead and built a house. If I'm fired, I won't be able to pay off the mortgage. His personal circumstances, however, were none of my concern. The former chairman had chosen to establish our first overseas branch in America because of his deep affection for the country. Knowing that such an incident had occurred at the American branch would undoubtedly sadden him greatly. As an American, I felt an overwhelming sense of shame. My role here ends now. The rest will be left to the president of the American branch. So at least handle the situation with sincerity from here on out. Even while living in Japan, I've never forgotten my sense of patriotism. You too should carry both pride and responsibility for being an American. Pride and responsibility. I think I'm starting to understand why Arisa chose you and why you're the leader of a global department store chain. There really are Americans like you out there. Somehow, we could both sense each other's feelings in that moment. If we had met sooner, we might not have ended up as adversaries like this. I couldn't help but wonder, if Scott had met me earlier in life, perhaps he wouldn't have grown into someone so disliked by everyone. Scott didn't seem to fully realize how his sarcastic personality and petty tendencies had shaped him. Had someone pointed it out to him earlier in his life, he might have changed his way of thinking and made more friends along the way. That said, Scott was still in his 30s. I wanted to believe he still had plenty of opportunities to turn his life around. At that moment, the assistant sales manager approached me with an apologetic expression. "Well, the video conference with headquarters is about to start. What should we do?" "There's no need for the meeting anymore. The issue has been resolved. Besides, the whole point of that meeting was just a distraction to keep Scott from noticing the investigation. It's all over then. Now I finally have my Alan all to myself again." I wrapped my arm around her waist and pulled her close, then walked out of the sales floor with confidence. Our bodyguards silently followed behind us. I would never return to this place again. The data I gathered served as undeniable proof. Luxury watches were indeed being siphoned off from the American branch. Scott had been drowning in debt, and he had orchestrated the scheme to cover his financial losses. From here on out, I would hand things over to the president of the American branch and return to my regular work. As expected, Scott was promptly fired. The case was taken to civil court, and Scott was sentenced to spend the rest of his life repaying the company. But why did Scott need so much money in the first place? As it turned out, he'd had become infatuated with a foreign woman who worked at a nightclub and had been funneling the embezzled money to her. Rumor had it that she bore a striking resemblance to a woman from his past, jet black hair and similar features. Scott had genuinely fallen for her and was even considering marriage. However, whenever the topic of marriage came up, she would skillfully dodge the conversation, keeping the relationship strictly as employee and client. She must have known that maintaining that dynamic allowed her to extract the maximum amount of money from him. In the end, the moment she found out Scott had been fired, she vanished without a trace. When I returned to Japan and reported everything, my father-in-law simply sighed and said, "It's a story as old as time." He reassured me, adding, "This won't make me hate America." His words reminded me of my responsibility, not just to him, but to all the employees working for our company worldwide. I knew I had to work even harder. As for what became of Scott afterward, I began hearing rumors from employees at the American branch. He needed to find another job to pay back the company, but securing employment proved difficult. On top of that, after pouring so much money into his dream woman only for her to disappear without a word, he developed a deep mistrust of women. His life spiraled downward. Unable to make ends meet, he was ultimately forced to sell the brand new house he had just purchased. Perhaps that home was meant to be the place where he and the woman he adored would start their life together. Even then, Scott was still far from repaying his debts. In desperation, he turned to underground lenders. Their collection methods were ruthless, and before he could fully pay back what he owed, Scott disappeared without a trace. No one knows where he is or what he's doing now. 2 years have passed since then, and our family has grown. We welcomed a daughter into our lives. Wanting a name that could also be written in Chinese characters, we named her Maria. With such an adorable granddaughter, my father-in-law has completely embraced his role as a doting grandfather. Recently, Arisa and Maria appeared in an advertisement for our globally recognized company, drawing widespread attention. Our family has now become a symbol of admiration across the world. To protect this happiness and to make it even greater, I intend to continue striving forward. Closing a poor student's account. For example, if you're upset, leave this place. When you are a valued customer, return. George, the bank employee, grinned smugly as he said this while wearing his uniform. I thought what a manner he could have fun. I felt that canceling my account was very harsh. As I considered my options, I devised a cunning scheme. All right, I'll go quietly. But could you maybe check one thing for me before I leave? What? Okay, hold on. What? After showing George the transaction cannot be processed screen from the ATM, I gave him my bank book and showed him the balance. George counted the zeros over and over, his face going white. I started preparing my next move in the interim. You can call me Alex Weston. I was going to move out on my own this summer after being accepted to my first choice university. It's both thrilling and nerve-wracking to leave the house I've called home for more than a decade, but it's a necessary step on the path to freedom. Back in high school, I had made the decision that when I started college, I would leave my uncle and aunt's home. More over 10 years ago, my parents died in a vehicle accident. My uncle and aunt took me in because my grandparents were too elderly to care for me. They treated me like their son because they didn't have any children of their own. I was able to mature and become an adult because of them. They made time out of their hectic schedules to assist me whenever I was having trouble with my coursework. They did everything in their power to defend me when I was made fun of at school for not having parents. I am incredibly appreciative of them for taking care of me for a longer period of time than my parents ever did. A little early, but I want to thank Beth and Robert for everything. I sincerely appreciate the way you brought me up. On the day I got my letter of acceptance, I thanked them. Thank you, Alex. Being a parent for 10 years was a blessing. You've developed into a wonderful young man, and I can now inform your parents with pride. But in the summer, you'll have a lot to get ready for. You know, you can always return. Remember to give us a call occasionally. I'll send you anything you require. I felt a little ashamed when Beth wiped her tears with a handkerchief and grieved, even though it wasn't a final goodbye. But looking back, I realized I underestimated the reality of independence. I was shamefully unprepared for the responsibilities of daily life, as Robert and Beth had always handled them for me. I had no idea that preparing to live on my own would involve so many complicated tasks. From the moment I got my acceptance letter, I was buried under a mountain of things to do: insurance registration, opening a new bank account, and so on. Let's arrange for your tuition and fees to be deducted from your account, Alex. You should open a university account to manage your expenses and tuition separately. Once I found an apartment, I had to set up utilities like water, electricity, and gas. I also needed to buy furniture and appliances for my new place. I cursed my naivety for thinking I could relax now that the exams were over. Having rarely visited a bank before, everything felt completely new. I didn't even realize I needed to open an account, which became a funny anecdote. Can I just use my student ID instead? I was used to managing small amounts of pocket money or digital payments on my phone, so the thought of handling large amounts like tuition was terrifying. I felt so nervous that my hands trembled, knowing I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. But since I was about to live on my own, I had to learn to handle transfers and payments myself. Until I got used to it, I planned to visit the ATM during quieter times when attendants were available to help. It seemed I wasn't the only one. This time of year, many students starting their solo lives were using banks for the first time. Most of the attendants were kind and patient, which was a lifesaver. But no matter how kind the majority might be, there are always exceptions. And I happened to meet one of those exceptions. Wow! I sighed at the nearest ATM corner. It was the 15th of an even-numbered month, and the ATM corner at Horizon Bank was packed. Being new to all this, I had forgotten it was pension day, which meant long lines at the ATM. To make matters worse, it was also the 5th and 10th, adding to the congestion. Some people were rushing in during their lunch breaks, creating a tense atmosphere. Adding to the tension was the ATM attendant, George. Coming here on such a busy day. Of course, it's crowded. If you don't know how to use a machine, come back when it's less busy. George's name tag was visible as he yelled at an elderly customer who seemed unsure of what to do. Without sparing a glance at the disheartened old man, George continued managing the line with little care or courtesy. His unhelpful attitude made me consider leaving. But I cooled it. I had forgotten an important payment, and today was the deadline. Overwhelmed by the flood of tasks, I had completely lost track of time. Since I would be out all evening, I had no choice but to make the payment now. Feeling cornered, I reluctantly joined the back of the line. After waiting nervously for a while, my turn finally came. I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself. George gave me a glance that seemed to say, "Can't this wait?" making me even more uneasy. Telling myself I've done this before, I inserted my bank book and card into the machine. I carefully checked each step, worried about accidentally sending money to the wrong account. This slow, cautious process must have annoyed the people behind me. Meanwhile, George had been pacing behind me, making his presence impossible to ignore. Not done yet. The attendant leaned in to peer at my screen, making it hard to concentrate. "Could you not look at my PIN? Please, if you need assistance, feel free to ask. It's quite busy today." I turned around and found George standing so close that I could feel his breath. His words were polite, but they essentially meant, "Hurry up." Feeling flustered, I accidentally pressed the wrong button and had to start over. George's movements distracted me, and I made several more mistakes. "Are you a student? There are plenty of customers waiting behind you. If it's not urgent, why don't you come back later?" The sudden comment startled me as I focused on the transaction. Looking back, George's face clearly showed annoyance. The politeness he had earlier was completely gone. His attitude now made no attempt to hide his irritation, leaving me stunned. It's really frustrating, you know. People who don't know how to use the machine show up at the busiest times and hog the ATM. I bet your mom handled everything for you until now. While it was true that I hadn't done much on my own before, I'd just been a high school student buried in studies every day. At my age, it wasn't unusual to be unfamiliar with ATMs. Ignoring George's muttering, I finally managed to finish my transfer. I felt like I deserved a pat on the back. "Hurry up and stop dawdling. Let the next person go." As I tried to put away my receipt and bank book, George kept pestering me. The ATM's anti-forget alarm beeped repeatedly, sending me into a near panic. I wanted to yell, "I'm putting things away as fast as I can." But my bag zipper got stuck, and my wallet seemed to disappear into thin air. "Don't rush me. Wait, what are you doing? My card is still." Before I could finish, George shoved me aside. I hadn't retrieved my card yet. As I reached out in desperation, I let out a cry of despair. After the time limit expired, the ATM swallowed my card. Staring at the machine, I froze in disbelief. George glared at me with narrowed eyes. This is why I can't stand slowpokes. You don't even have much money in your account, yet you act like an important customer. Once a card is swallowed, it's a hassle to get it back. Apparently, retrieving a swallowed card required identity verification and paperwork. Getting scolded out of nowhere left me panicked and embarrassed. But then it hit me. This wasn't my fault, was it? If anything, George's rushing and shoving caused the mistake and made me leave my card behind. The realization cooled my head, and George's angry rant started to look ridiculous. He was probably trying to pin the blame on me to avoid acknowledging his own mistake. "Go to the counter and handle the paperwork." While you're at it, why not close your account too? What's that supposed to mean? I couldn't help but ask. Closing the account of a poor student like you. Get out of here. If you're upset, come back when you're a high-value customer. Sure, I was an inexperienced student, but even I knew this wasn't how a customer should be treated. It was obvious that George chose who to respect and who to belittle based on his own biases. Anger welled up in me. Understood. I'll leave quietly. But before I go, could you check something for me? What? Fine. Wait. What? I showed George the merciless message on the ATM screen. Transaction cannot be processed. Then, I placed my bank book on the screen. Seeing the balance, George froze, mouth agape. Let's just say the number of zeros in my balance was 6. This situation, where I can't access my funds, is your fault. Since the amount is significant, I'll consult my guardians and return later. I made sure George saw both the ATM screen and the bank book, ensuring he understood that his actions had caused a millionaire customer's funds to become inaccessible. A high-value customer. Why? How? You're just a student. Why does your account have such a large balance? Sadly, it's my inheritance from my parents and grandparents. Since my parents died in an unexpected car accident, I received their life insurance and compensation. Later, when my grandparents passed away peacefully, I inherited their assets through legal succession. My grandparents had been relatively wealthy, which left me with a balance not typical for a student. My uncle, who is an attorney, not only took me in and raised me, but also managed my assets as my legal guardian. Now that I've turned 18 and legally become an adult, we decided that I would start managing those assets myself as I head to college. All the overwhelming paperwork stems from that decision. Having completed the transfer, I figured there was no risk of losing the card if the bank held on to it. Leaving George, who was still flustered, behind, I returned home. Since my uncle happened to be home, I told him everything that had happened. Following my uncle's advice, I sent a formal complaint about my experience to Horizon Bank. That very same day, the branch manager called to apologize. Please let me visit with George and offer our apologies in person. They made the offer, but I declined. He clearly underestimated me because I'm a student and treated me unfairly. I don't want someone like that knowing where I live. And honestly, I don't even want to see him. Even so, we need to return your card. It would be a burden to ask you to come in, so please allow us to deliver it to you. I'll come and pick it up myself. The branch manager was likely under pressure from higher-ups. They were quite insistent. As I went back and forth on the phone, my uncle, Robert, who had been listening, gestured for me to hand it over. This is Alex Weston's legal counsel, Robert Weston. Ah, yes, that's correct. The branch manager's shocked voice was audible even from where I stood, but my uncle, a seasoned professional, quickly resolved the situation. Soon enough, it was agreed that Robert and I would visit the bank to retrieve the card. When we arrived at the bank, we were immediately escorted to the reception room and treated with the utmost respect. While my uncle seemed used to this, I, who had been just a high school student until recently, was overwhelmed by the intimidating atmosphere. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. My sincerest apologies for my failure to properly train our staff, the branch manager said, bowing deeply. Meanwhile, George stood there with a sullen expression, only giving a slight nod. That wasn't an apology. It was a mere gesture of acknowledgement. Even I, inexperienced as I was, could tell the difference. Was this his usual attitude toward customers, or was he just having a bad day? After looking into it, we found that George had repeatedly exhibited this behavior toward customers. We were aware of occasional complaints, the branch manager admitted. According to him, working as an ATM or lobby attendant involved learning a lot of detailed procedures. Since the job also required dealing with increasingly demanding customers, turnover was high. With staff shortages already a problem, losing a permanent employee would be a big issue, so they often hired part-time workers through temp agencies. George, despite being a temp worker, had been at the bank for over 5 years. His knowledge of policy changes and operational details made him reliable in many ways. However, his moodiness and tendency to lose motivation after criticism were major drawbacks. The branch manager admitted he often struggled to manage George. Occasional complaints. Mocking someone struggling with a task and assuming a student must be poor. Doesn't that go beyond occasional? I asked. You're absolutely right. I had no excuse, the branch manager said, wiping the sweat from his brow and visibly shrinking. Yet, George hadn't even spoken up. He was just staring off into space while his boss kept apologizing on his behalf. He clearly had no intention of taking responsibility. What did you say? You're just a student. Stop it, George. You're cleaning up your own mess. Apologize properly. Though I had spoken more forcefully than I intended, it was still the branch manager who kept apologizing profusely. Meanwhile, George pressed his lips into a tight line, looking like he might snap back at any moment. Fine. The account balance shows he's not poor. That part was my mistake, he finally said. But he didn't earn that money himself, so what's with the attitude? Giving a kid this much money. What kind of parenting is that? No wonder things like this happen. When he finally opened his mouth, those were the words he chose. I felt a rush of blood to my head. A person's private assets have nothing to do with your disrespect, my uncle said calmly, continuing to make unjust insults in front of me. An attorney is not a wise choice. With that remark, the air in the room froze. Even George, who had been acting so brashly, went quiet in the face of my uncle's authoritative presence. Also, weren't you peeking at the ATM screen from behind? My uncle continued. Using your position like that, whether or not you actually stole the pin, it would be hard to deny if someone accused you of doing so. At those words, both the branch manager and George turned pale. And let's not forget, you forcibly shoved this boy away from the ATM before he had even retrieved his card. On top of that, you loudly declared he was a high-value customer for anyone nearby to hear. My uncle continued his verbal assault. Though usually calm and gentlemanly, once angered, he would unleash the full weight of his legal knowledge to corner his opponent. I knew just how intimidating that could be. From both a privacy and security perspective, this is highly regrettable. If personal information were leaked, well, there's no choice but to take action, he said. After all, some might share George's belief that it's inappropriate for a student to hold significant wealth. Why was I starting to sweat, even though I wasn't the one being scolded? The tension was palpable. For George and the branch manager, who were directly responsible, this must have felt like a nightmare. Between the insults to this boy, the matter of peeking at his pin, and everything else, we have many grievances, my uncle said. But we're not looking to escalate this unnecessarily. How about we settle this with a sincere apology from George and by changing the pin? Does that sound fair? His tone was gentle, even cheerful, but his words were ruthless. He was essentially saying that if they didn't apologize properly, he would escalate the issue and report it to the relevant authorities. As a temp worker who had both peeked at a customer's PIN and inadvertently disclosed the wealth of a client, George was in a precarious position. And the branch manager, being responsible for managing him, was equally at risk. At minimum, the two of them would face severe disciplinary action. In the worst case, they might lose their jobs. If it escalated to a lawsuit, the fallout would be devastating. I deeply apologize for my actions as a bank employee. Please forgive me, George muttered. Seconds later, both he and the branch manager offered a sincere apology for the inconvenience. Later, the branch manager sent a formal proposal for corrective measures to my uncle's law office. Among the listed measures was George's reassignment, which made me chuckle despite myself. Apparently, the incident was widely shared among the bank staff as a cautionary tale, leaving George in an awkward position. The branch manager, who had long struggled to deal with George, decided not to renew his contract after considering this incident and his past behavior. To prevent retaliation against me, George would be employed until the end of his term, but the temp agency had already been informed. In effect, he was being fired. At over 50 years old, George, who had caused trouble at his placement, would likely struggle to find another assignment. Even if he did, it would probably come with significantly worse terms. As a temp bank employee, he must have enjoyed decent pay, which made this all the more unfortunate. My uncle speculated that George had begun to confuse the prestige of the bank with his own standing, leading to this downfall. Apparently, this happens more often than one might think. As for me, I wasn't spared from my uncle's scolding. Flashing your bank book like that, even to a bank employee, was careless, he told me. And I couldn't argue. It was a hard lesson learned. Since then, I've changed my pen and am preparing to move into my new apartment, so I'm reasonably secure for now. My uncle also advised me to open several accounts to diversify risk and comply with deposit insurance limits. By the way, I noticed you've been avoiding it, but online banking is pretty convenient. You wouldn't even need to visit the bank in cases like this, and you wouldn't have to deal with rude staff. No way, more applications. I couldn't help but groan. After this flood of paperwork, I couldn't bear the thought of more forms. According to my aunt, things have gotten much easier in recent years, with more processes digitized and simple applications available online. I couldn't believe it. See? Putting off tasks because they're a hassle is what led to this mess. Once you set it up, it'll save you a lot of time and effort. For managing expenses, I recommend debit cards over credit cards, by the way. Listening to my uncle's cheerful explanations, I collapsed face first onto the table. It seemed my endless journey through bureaucratic hell was far from over.